Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing my July wrap-up. July was a slow month for me. As you can see, I'm back in my Boston apartment, and this is probably one of the last videos that I will have in this apartment because I'm moving in the middle of next month. It's been a busy time looking for apartments, coming back here, just a lot of stuff going on. And also just like I have not been in the mood to read anything. Audiobooks or even just reading a physical book while the audiobook is playing is like the only way I can focus and have enough attention to get through a book. And it's not because I'm not liking stuff, I just cannot keep my attention anymore. There has to be a scientific study about like anxiety, depression combined with like being in quarantine, how it's like ruined attention spans. I think TikTok also has something to do with it, but something's going on there. I know it's not just me that's feeling those things. But anyway, let's get into all the books that I read this month, and I'm going to be going in order of when I read them. So the first book I have on here is The House of Many Ways by Diane Wayne Jones. This is the third companion novel in the Howl's Moving Castle series. I'm a big fan of Howl's Moving Castle, both the movie and the book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I make a point of rereading it almost every year. I love the movie just as much. And I've always really disliked the second book in the series. It works off of a bunch of different stereotypes from like the 1001 Nights myth. It's always just like rubbed me the wrong way. And I thought I really liked the third book, and I've always kind of held it in high regard. But rereading it now, I kind of have to take back my opinions. I don't hate it. I think it's a fine book. It did nothing wrong, but it just wasn't as amazing as I remember it being. The House in Many Ways follows a young girl who has to take care of a wizard's house, and the house has lots of doorways to different magical places. There's a lot of mythology and connections to Howl's Moving Castle, and this might be the wizard that actually like invented the way to make the doors in Howl's Moving Castle. It's kind of inferred that. Also, Howl and Sophie show up in this book, which, you know, makes it really fun to read. And it was a really fun read, I will admit that. Like, I still had a good time with it. I really do like the main character of the series. But looking at this from a different lens, I don't think it's as complete of a story. I think there is a little bit something missing there with the story arcs of the characters. And then as far as like the main villain is basically, there are these like almost grasshopper kind of beings, alien monster beings that are just like really evil, just pure evil, and they want to eradicate the human race. So it's that creature and also its offspring, which has mated with humans and created like evil humans that are just innately evil. I know it probably wasn't Diane Wayne Jones' intention for it to come off this way, but just like reading it now through a different lens, it has a lot of really interesting and kind of problematic connotations, which I think would make a really actually interesting like video or essay, like scholarly essay. But reading it now from like a modern perspective, it did feel very odd, very eugenics and weird to read about. And like I was just kind of picking up on that thread, and you know, we have a lot of really interesting racial connotations in texts, especially in fantasy. We just have a lot of really interesting connotations, and I just don't think that this story aged super well. Besides that, it's kind of just an okay fantasy story. I liked it for the characters, I like it for the world, but as a story, it wasn't perfect. The next book I read was Firekeepers Daughter by Angeline Boulley, and this is a mystery thriller-ish kind of story about a young woman who is indigenous, and in her community people are going missing, and there are a lot of people that are ODing over drugs, and it's kind of about her getting pulled into the mystery of like what's really going on in the town. And I really enjoyed this novel. I don't read a lot of mystery thriller kind of stories. This had me on the edge of my seat. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but more importantly than like the mystery aspect, I was so attached to the characters of this novel. In the story, the main character is seeing loved ones pass away, go through hardships, and so it's really emotionally connected to her and her personal journey. And I just really loved her personal arc. It was just so compelling as a story. And also the novel is so connected to her and her indigenous roots. So we get to see a lot of what it means to be growing up indigenous, and I just really loved like the atmosphere of this book. The setting of this book was really well done. I loved the outward mystery of the novel, but I also loved the internal mystery of like slowly discovering parts about the main character. Everything was just a really compelling, well-crafted story, and I'm really looking forward to more by this author. I just really enjoyed her writing. This book also takes place in the early 2000s, I believe, which really added an element to me, which I wasn't expecting from this novel, but I thought it was really well done, and I really enjoyed that kind of setting. I would really recommend this. Maybe if you're a big mystery thriller person, you would not be as compelled by the mystery aspect of the story, but the story overall I think is just really, really well executed and compelling, so I would definitely pick it up for that reason. I was honestly so connected to the character that I didn't really care what was going on with the plot, although it was really, really interesting as well. And I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I just really, really enjoyed it. The next book I read was Ace by Angela Chen, or Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex. And this is a nonfiction book all about the asexual identity. So it breaks down asexuality, gives us a lot of facts and figures about it, but it also goes through personal stories, and it also, like the title says, it kind of breaks down, like, you know, what sex and relationships mean to society, and it kind of looks at a bigger picture of like why we need to deconstruct these kind of concepts, and I just thought it was a really well done book. The first half, if you know a lot about asexuality, you might not get as much out of, but a lot of the smaller sub discussions in the later half of the book, especially like the kind of ending thesis about this book, I thought was really, really compelling and really well done, and I think it will make people think in different ways that they'd never really thought about sex and sexuality and all this stuff. It's really fascinating. I think it was a really good book because it really like delved into like very niche specific things about asexual identities. It also had like the personal aspect to it, but it also really opened the story up and explored stuff in a really big way. The next book I read was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is an adult historical fiction novel? Adult literary fiction novel. Most of it takes place in the past, I believe. This was a book that I've been hearing a lot about, so I recommended my mom pick it up so I could steal the book from her when she was finished with it. And this is really a story about going through these two women's lives and then their children's lives. And the two women that the story is focusing on are twins. Both of them are light-skinned mixed women, and in their adult lives, one of them chooses to present as a black woman and the other one chooses to present as a white woman. And this was just a really, really well done, compelling novel. If you really like Celeste Ng, I would recommend this book as well, just because of the craft element of this book. This book kind of goes back and forth between different time periods, it goes back and forth between different character POVs, and it's just really excellently crafted so that it's a really compelling narrative. Just the way that it's able to weave through the characters, to weave through the stories and the timelines is just really, really well done. And I ended up giving this another 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but it's like not my favorite literary fiction book of all time, but I would really recommend it. And the final book I read this month was The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He, and I gave this a 3.5 star rating. This is a dystopian, sci-fi, futuristic, young adult novel, and it's following two sisters. One of the sisters is stranded on an island, kind of doesn't have a lot of her memories, but knows that she has to get back to her sister, and the other sister is on this futuristic eco floating city where everybody's eco footprint is monitored to the extreme. And this book was really compelling for a multitude of reasons. I really liked the writing. First of all, it's very lyrical. It has almost a fabulous or surreal element to it. I just really, really gelled with the style of writing. I really enjoyed the characters. They were complex, they were flawed. Casey, the girl in the eco city, is just really fascinating to me because she has a very cold, hard demeanor to her. And then the sister on the island also had like a very kooky kind of way that she thought about things, and I really enjoyed that. And as their story unraveled, the sister story, just like their dynamic, their relationship is just really, really interesting and really compelling. I liked all the themes that this book was trying to portray and go over. I thought that was really interesting. And the second half of this book is just really fast-paced and just really, really interesting. But I will say the first part of this book is a little bit slower. It's a little harder to get into. I'm normally really big on like survival, living on an island kind of stories, but I think the thing that felt really slow actually was like the eco city elements. For me, I just thought that the setting, while interesting, was just a little bit hard to imagine. I had a really hard time just knowing what Casey did from a day-to-day basis, like what her daily schedule was like, who she was as a person. It kept introducing new settings and locations and things that Casey did, and I was just having a really hard time following that. Like at first I thought she was just like a person who, you know, monitored stuff, was like a STEM person, and then she was like a regular high school student. It just felt a little bit confusing with her world building. And then it felt like we were getting withheld information that just made like her situation a little bit confusing, like I wasn't sure about certain things. And I honestly don't know how much it did for the story to withhold some of those things, like why Casey couldn't do science anymore kind of a thing. Just like the eco city itself was a little bit confusing, like I didn't understand all the rules and everything. I think this book really shone in the second half and like what it was trying to, not portray, but like what it was going into. I'm trying not to give too much away because this story is really built around like discovering little nuggets of the mystery. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that was really compelling about this novel. Some of the world building was really confusing, and I did slog through the first half of the book. And as far as my next month of reading, for August reading, I will be reading The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. I've read the first 50 pages of it this month, and I'm excited to continue and finish up the series, and so I will talk about this in my next wrap-up. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you read a really good book this month, let me know in the comments down below. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.